Hi, I'm Kelly, and I want to talk to you guys about professional photography and education. Specifically, what a professional growth and development roadmap should be for a professional photographer from my perspective. Um, if you look at the industry right now and say, okay, what is the professional growth and development roadmap for a professional photographer? There isn't one. PPA doesn't have one. ASP doesn't have one. Santa Fe doesn't have one. New York Institute of Photography doesn't have one that's available, that's usable from any photographer that's starting out and wants to kind of follow a well-defined roadmap to become from apprentice to journeyman to mastery of the knowledge and skills uh, and abilities that a modern photographer needs to be successful. So I want to talk a little bit about that. And specifically, I want to talk about how some photographers may not have a full grasp or understanding of what certain things are. For example, as we grow and develop as a skilled professional, there's a thing called the KSAs: knowledge, skill, and ability. Your knowledge, you have to understand the knowledge and theories behind something, and then you apply that in actual tactile, physical doing something, a skill like photography, and then you do it to a certain standard with a subject matter expert watching and observing and critiquing and mentoring you through the process. And over time, muscle memory and continue practicing, and you become master at it. And in the past, they used to say mastery takes 10 years to do. Nowadays, with intelligent tutoring programs and other things, you could probably do it in 7 or 8, maybe 9 years instead of 10. But the fundamentals are you don't become a master the next day. That's why I've always had a problem with somebody calls some a master class and it's 3 hours long, or a master class and it's 2 days long. There is no real such thing as a master class that's that short, unless you're going to master how to sharpen a pencil. So the skill required to do that and the knowledge is so minimal that you could probably master that pretty shortly. But in a very complex skill like photography that includes all of the individual pieces and parts to go from from vision to actual final image, it's not going to do it. You're not going to do that in 1 hour or 2 hours or 3 days. It takes time. It takes years. I mean, you look at the Tony Corbells and Tim Waltons, and you look at the well-known photographers out there. They didn't become masters in the first year. It took time, and that's what most photographers want to do. They want to become a master at their craft. Speaking of which, innovation. So as we go down this road, this path of growth and development, you also have to consider new skills that are necessary to keep up with innovation. AI, new editing processes, new equipment, new gadgets, bringing video into a still photography world, because that's where things are headed. So let's talk about the roadmap of a professional photographer. There's a thing called knowledge, skills, and abilities, and it's three pieces that at the aggregate comprise the growth and development of a photographer. For example, you must have the knowledge and theory to a certain standard in order to apply it to actually do something physically, like a skill. To develop a skill, you have to have the theory and knowledge first. In the world of professional photographer or photography, the professional photographers of America have a thing called the CPP, Certified Professional Photographer. Now, let's let the cat out of the bag. There is no such thing as a certified professional photographer when you take a rote knowledge and theory test. So the foundation of knowledge is what that test does. It says, based on whoever decides what's going into the test, and it should be a living, breathing thing that constantly changes with the emerging and changes of the landscape of our profession. The CPP exam really is a photographer's foundation's certificate. You have demonstrated ability or a knowledge and theories associated to become a modern photographer. So the CPP is not really certified professional photography. It's like a 100, 200 series college course when you take those prerequisites in order to start working on your actual area of study, doctorate, masters, bachelors, associates, it doesn't matter. So the 100 and 200 series courses are your core content that you will need in order to apply it in your later higher level classes, like your 300 or 400 series classes, or your 500 or 600 series classes. So the CPP, let's be honest, is not certified professional photography. It's a fundamental foundation of theory and knowledge needed from those who design the test for a modern photographer. So when you look at the camera lenses, lighting and flash photography, design and composition, digital post-production, introduction to business, and then the technical image evaluation process that currently exists in the test, that is what PPA's group or some group decided that represents the foundation knowledge needed to move on and become today's modern photographer. So let's put that in perspective. That's one thing that I think is really important. So the foundation that tests saying I've achieved a certain level is now you're ready to go to the next step. So in my opinion, you shouldn't be a master photographer without having that test completed. Or you don't need the test, and becoming a master photographer already says you already have that knowledge. Well, therefore, the test is academic. You don't need it. Like 100, 200 series test question or test or classes in university, there is no recertification. You don't have to take a 101 class every 3 years like the CPP requirements have now. I'm not sure what the recertification process is unless there is new information that's needed to be understood and you need to prove your understanding of that's been added to the test. Therefore, you take the test again. But that's not recertification. It says, well, if you have enough merits and you've attended enough conferences, you've done whatever, we'll just assume that you have that additional knowledge. Well, that's not a recertification as a professional photography. That's just you're still doing photography, in my opinion. So the concept of the foundation is critical in adult education, and PPA has got it. I truly believe in that test. I just think it needs to be titled differently. So let's look at this, the growth and development roadmap. At the bottom of that thing is the foundation. We just talked about it. It's the theory of knowledge and assessment. They assess your theory of knowledge. And then the next thing is where you start attending schools, workshops, and going to conferences. This is where you start building upon and applying the skills with already the foundation in there. The foundation is a prerequisite and should be as you grow and develop. And by the way, the foundation is a living, breathing thing. So maybe 3 years into you being a photographer or 5 years into being a photographer, you must probably do continuous understanding and learning the theory and knowledges of different things. Maybe you're going to a class at Texas school and you're learning new things. Well, there's a theory and knowledge to the new stuff that's outside of what's called the CPP exam, what really should be the photography foundation certificate program. And so therefore the theory and knowledge learning is a continuous thing over your growth and development roadmap. But schools, workshops, and conferences are critical. Now, I've said before, and I'll say it again, how you decide what education that is right for you must not be based on the social activities, the parties, the networking. It must be associated to what are the learning objectives of that school, of that workshop, or what am I going to attain at a conference that's going to make me better? It's going to leverage my theory and knowledge foundation, and I'm going to be a better photographer from it. And that is so important, and I see it so often. Photographers tell me they attended this conference, they attended this school, they attended this workshop, and they walked away with, well, that was nice, but I really didn't make me better. And that's bad. That's sad. It's even more important because the Department of Labor says the average photographer makes about $50,000 a year. The average photographer. I mean, all of this money and gear and time and effort and learning, and you're making $19 an hour. I mean, that's what the Department of Labor says. Now, caveat that the Department of Labor is only taking the statistics from those who report being a photographer and income. There's a lot of people out there that are photographers that are having income, but they're not being reported. It's not of an official business per se. So understanding that variable, still there's not a whole lot of people that are making 6-digit incomes from photography. It's a smaller group, at least the Department of Labor says. If the numbers are so significantly wrong that the Department of Labor has, there's a lot of people making a lot of money that's not reporting it, or at least not to the Department of Labor, or it's not part of this tax process. All right, so foundation, followed by various schools, workshops, and conferences that starts you off on a road to growth and development. Now, there are some really great photographers out there that I've talked with, and we've had discussions saying, if you took Sandra Pierce's digital painting workshop, if you take Tim Walden's flow of light workshop, you talk to Tony Corbell and you learn and observe him and how he approaches portraiture, or the Hammonds and how they do landscapes or whatever. There is an accepted set of instructors out there, teachers that have been proven that they know what they're doing. Like Colleen and I'm pretty sure we're recognized as providing some pretty significantly impacting education, and I want that. I like that about us. I'm proud of that. But there's a lot that isn't. I mean, to be very frank, there's a lot of education out there that isn't done because they understand how to evaluate what training is necessary. And then creating content that's logical, and then delivering that content in a way that's not only challenging, but it's exciting and it keeps the student really intensely involved, and then evaluating how it went and tweaking it each time. There's a thing called the ADDIE model. The ADDIE model is analyzing what's necessary. It's called skills analysis, requirements analysis. So you say, okay, a photographer needs to be able to do strobes. All right, so what are all the little things that a photographer has to do in order to successfully operate strobes? Well, they need to understand the remotes. They need to be able to change the output of the strobe. They need to understand the exposure triangle, and so on and so on and so on. So you make all of these analysis of what's needed to be successful with strobes, and then you build content that supports that analysis, and then you have learning objectives. So, for instance, if you take our Texas School class, we're going to tell you right up front, at the end of this week, you're going to understand the following things at a success or an acceptable level, a standard. Saying somebody you're going to go to our class and we're going to cover these things, that doesn't mean you're going to learn it. That doesn't mean you're going to learn it at a certain level. That just means we're going to cover it. That's a problem. So one of the things I've always told people is when you pick which instruction or workshop or education you're going to attend, you do it intelligently. You ask hard questions to those who are going to instruct you. All right, tell me what the learning objective is for your class. How long do I have? How much is hands-on as opposed to root knowledge in PowerPoint? Am I going to be hit to death with PowerPoints? Those kind of things. So picking your schools and workshops is so important, yet so many people they don't do it. If you went to a university, you're going to have a guidance counselor. And they're going to tell you, here's the courses you need to take. Okay, you want to do this. These are the courses you need to take, and these are the order in which you need to take them. This is based on their knowledge and understanding of how to best provide you a roadmap to achieve a certain thing. In this case, our roadmap, the professional photographer's growth and development roadmap, is the same thing. So once you've gone to those schools and workshops, and it's a continuation. Remember, you should never stop doing that. There's a process called the validation piece. This is where you need to validate that you've achieved a certain level of acumen, skill, ability, and so image competitions is one way to validate a certain level of capability. Critiques, validating whether you're doing something right or you're not doing something right, is also important. Mentorship, having somebody that's your mentor and that can look at you and talk with you with honesty and forthrightness, saying you're not doing this well or this is not correct and you need to do this better. I don't know how many photographers out there that don't have a mentor. I would imagine it's probably 90 or higher percent of photographers out there that do not have an active mentor-mentee relationship, and that's sad. I mean, it really is sad. I mean, I've had many through my career, and I try to be a mentor to those who ask for it. But I think that is an area, as a side note, that you need to leverage. Find a photographer or a group of photographers that perform and is producing images that really speak to you, and ask them. Even if you get 5 no's, you're going to get 1 or 2 yeses over 10 people you ask. I'd be proud to be asked, and most photographers I know would be. Mentorship doesn't mean to be an every single day event. It doesn't have to, it doesn't mean that you need to have a photographer investing hours upon hours to mentor you. It's really about having a photographer that's willing to answer questions, give you honest critique or opinions on something that you've asked for or that they're observing in you. And if you combine that with 3 or 5, have an odd number of photographers, mentors, then you'll probably start getting a feel of a commonality of input that you can then utilize to apply changes to what you're doing based on their input. For example, if I was to have an image wanting to go to a competition, whether it's Icon or PPA's IPC or the Lucy Awards or WPE, whatever, it doesn't matter. I would probably, if I wanted to have my image looked at and give me an honest opinion, I am just as careful of asking, of who I ask, as I am of seeking it out. And I usually like to get three or five, an odd number, to give me an opinion. So what I look for is a commonality. So if three photographers give me a critique on an image, and then out of the 6 or 7 points that they bring up, or 3, it doesn't matter, I find the commonality of 1 point across all, and that's probably something that has validity to it. If one photographer says, well, I think the blue is not right, and the other photographers don't say anything, I probably find a little bit less on that. So as you're doing image critiques or image competitions, that's the concept of having mentorship, having people that you can rely on to go to ask their honest opinion about an image, and finding the common thread between them that really is probably an area you need to look and to tweak or to correct. So the validation process. So you have the foundation, then your schools, workshops, and conferences. So those two there are starting to build you as a photographer, and now you're using the image competitions as validation. How am I doing? What's the litmus test? What am I measuring to where I should be? So that leads me to another point: is image competitions. Not all image competitions are alike, and I'm not going to go too much involved, but the bottom line is image competitions aren't always a perfect reflection of where you need to grow or where your errors are. That's based on the group of judges that are looking at your image. For example, if I do a boudoir image and I submit it, and only one photographer, one judge out of the entire group even does portraits, let alone boudoir, but the other ones are commercial or landscape or astro, whatever, I'm less concerned about the overall judging, because I believe that judging should be done by people that are subject matter experts in that specific field. Not all competitions do that. So that's something to consider. If I submitted it to my local guild and it scores 80, and then the state gives it a 92, and then PPA gives it a calls it just a merit, not even a loan image. I have variations in what people believe in that image over various people to see it, and that's always been a problem, because you can't rely on some evaluative aggregate score of your image, because it's going to change. It could change, and dramatically. So being validation is sometimes a little bit of a tricky area to validate where you're going. The best one is the mentorship. People you believe in, people you trust, people that are successful, they've been proven professionals in that skill or that craft. Those are probably the ones that are giving you input that's even more reliable than even some image competitions. All right. Now, what about professional recognition? Now, most artists are well known to need recognition. They need to be noticed. They need to be seen. They need to be pat themselves on the back. I don't know how many times every single day I find a photographer patting themselves on the back so hard, I'm thinking they need to go see a chiropractor. It's got to hurt their back. I mean, they want to tell about, I won this, I won that, I earned this, I earned that, I earned this, I earned that. Great, but you don't need to do it 14 times. So there's a professional recognition that's overboard, but there is a true need for professional recognition, because it's important for you to show, again, validation, and show clients and show others that you know what you're doing, or at least to a certain standard. So for an example, if I do a professional photography degree, whether it's PPA's master photographer or artist or wedding or craftsman or ASP's fellowship or the icon master, all of those other things, those are professional recognition, and having them is an important part of being an artist. You want to be recognized, and if people are not recognizing what you're doing is good, you come to a point where people say, do it for you, don't care about what others feel. Well, that's easy to say, but that's not reality. Reality is every creative I know wants to be recognized for their creations have meaning. It impacts people. There's something, it speaks to some people. So, professional recognition. Remember, while we're in the professional recognition step in our growth and development plan, we're still looking at foundations. We're still adding new theory and knowledge to who we are. We're still attending schools and workshops and conferences as needed, assuming there's value to them. Remember, you don't go to a conference just because it's an annual thing and it's in Las Vegas or it's in Nashville. You go to it because there's something there that is worth the money, that's going to make you better. It's going to make your studio better. And if an hour and a half class doesn't do that for you, don't spend $2,000 or $3,000 to go. I mean, that to me, especially when you're only making a certain amount of money a year, it's just mind-boggling that people would spend that much money just to go sit around and pat each other on the back or network when you're really there for education. You get the same good deals online from the conference if you need to buy something new. I just think that a true conference benefit is the pre-con classes, because they're all day. The 1.5 or 3 hour long classes, that's theory and knowledge, and that's a minimum theory and knowledge piece. That's not skill development. Even if it's hands-on, it's not really heavy skills development. So that's another problem with conferences. But that's continuing on. So to review, foundation, the Photographer's Foundation Certificate, called CPP, call it whatever you want to. And then you have the schools and workshops that's continually helping you apply that theory and knowledge and learn a tactile skill. And over time, that muscle memory becomes an ability. And you constantly are taking on new things, looking at new innovation, new tools, and doing the theory and knowledge for them and applying them in the workshops or schools that you go to. And then you get validation from what all of those two things through image competitions, recognition with the degrees, earning merits, and then you get into the mastery level. So now we're talking about mastery level. So when I earned my ASP Education Associate, when I got up on the lectern and had my little speech, I asked the group, I said, how many Education Associates are there at ASP since the beginning of ASP? And there were 46. 46. So you think of the hundreds of people that have been members of ASP, and only 46 moved on in their mastery level to be educators. I didn't quite understand it. It's a logical move. If you had done all of those things in your path, validation and recognition, that you start teaching. You have to, so why isn't there more people doing the EA? But that's a mastery level. It's a next step outside of PPA. Same thing in the fellows. The fellows is really a defining point where you're submitting a significant body of work and you're writing up, you're doing a write-up, and you're being evaluated as have you achieved that level of excellence. And that's where, if you look at the fellows in the ASP, they're pretty recognized. Their work is pretty awesome. And so if you look at the overall professional development, growth, and roadmap for a professional photographer, that's the kind of thing we're talking about. The Lucy Awards, we're earning a Lucy Awards, National Geographic Awards. Those are the kind of things that are at the top tier that you really become a master at your craft. And what happens then is you start saying, okay, I can do this. I'm capable of doing this almost without thinking. Now, what is the next logical step? Teaching. And that's a whole other thing that I'm going to do another video on, is how to be an instructor, how to be an educator, what kind of learning and education you need to become an educator. Some people say, well, I have my ASP fellow, or I have a master photographer degree, or I'm a CPP and therefore I'm an educator. No, you're not. Just because because you picked up something and you got in front of people and start talking doesn't mean you're a good educator. There is reasons why people go through education classes to be an educator, is because they learn how to analyze a skill requirement. That's the analyzation. Then they build content based on the learning objectives of that. Then they deliver it in a way that makes you excited to be a student. And then they evaluate overall, and they verify that you've achieved a certain level as a student, that you've achieved a certain level of capability, standard, and then they evaluate the whole thing and see where they need to fix it, make it better, add new content to it because of innovation or changes. So one of the things that I've been asked to do is do a train the trainer. Spend 2 or 3 days, learning the foundation of being an educator, how to analyze what skill you're trying to teach, how to build learning objectives with standards, how to develop content that supports the learning objectives, and then how to deliver it. So that's coming in the future. So I summarize. There is a well-defined professional photography roadmap that I've created, that you could create or that you could follow, and I'll make this available to help you figure out where you're going as a photographer. I think less likely that the person been doing it for 5 or 10 years, they'll probably say, well, I'm already doing some of this and some of this I'm not doing, and maybe this will help them go back and do a couple of items in here to help them grow and develop into a holistic, modern professional photographer. But I think it's needed. I'm surprised that we have an industry where this roadmap doesn't exist. And finally, so if you were to say there's a professional photographer roadmap, this is general, applies to just photography. You could make one for boudoir. You could make one for landscapes. You could make one for wedding. You could make one for various subcategories of the photography. Or you could actually do video. The new cinematic portraiture that we are bringing to Texas School in our class this year. That's a whole other thing. How do you learn cinematic video? How do you learn video? What kind of gear do you need? How do you apply it? How do you edit video in a way that you can make short reels and short videos of content for your clients? I want to understand that the professional growth and development roadmap for a photographer, in this case, is very general, but the foundation is what they call CPP. It's not, you're not a certified professional photographer when you take that test, but it's the Photographer's Foundation Certificate. That's what it really is. What is the core knowledge and theories you need to apply in your next stage, which is the schools, workshops, and conferences portion, to move forward. All right. I think that covers it. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Later.